Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another Steelers preview podcast, another week where we are reminded that the Steelers are not going to be playing this weekend, but no one's going to be playing this weekend, so that's not that bad. It's the off week between, I guess this would be the Pro Bowl week, wouldn't it be? I think they're doing some stupid Madden game. I don't know. But anyways, I'm Jeff Hartman, the co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com for Hey, the Steelers preview's been running for a long time, and joining me as always, Dave Schofield, the other co-editor. What's up, Dave? How are you?
Doing all right, trying to stay warm. It's freezing and windy here. It's crazy.
It's cold, yeah, absolutely. And the podcast producer at Behind the Steel Curtain, Brian Anthony Davis. What's up, Brian?
Sup.
Sup.
Nah, it's great to be here with my friends. One of my favorite nights of the week. I love hanging out with you guys and talking Steelers and seeing all these people just showing up. It's the off season and lots of people care about our black and gold. Love it.
Absolutely. The diehards never leave no matter what, even though you'll see some fair weather fans. That's fine. We know we have some diehards always here in our live chat as we record this live on Thursday night. So Thursday, a lot of news broke. Okay. And before we get to the Art Rooney stuff, we will, don't worry. I think we had some news from the past week that we haven't discussed. It's been discussed on other shows, but we have not discussed it. Some of those were the Steelers finally started to make some hires within their coaching ranks. They made it official that Matt Canada is the offensive coordinator. Fernando, what's his last name? Is it Roberts?
Alfredo.
Alfredo.
It's Alfredo.
Yeah, you've got a fat guy here that loves fettuccine Alfredo. He's not forgetting that name.
I don't know if Jeff was thinking ABBA instead of noodles. I don't know what
I was thinking of. I was thinking of the scene in Elf where he's Francisco.
That's what I say.
So it's Alfredo. Robert.
Yeah.
It's not fettuccine Fernando.
Alfredo. And he's a new tight ends coach, former player for the Cowboys. He actually coached at a bunch of different teams, tight ends. He was with the Colts for a while, with the Chargers. And then today, Thursday, it was announced that Eddie Faulkner was given a 2-year extension or new contract. And I'll tell you what, people on Twitter were not happy with that. The Steelers are the worst running team in the NFL. What are you giving the running backs coach money for? This is stupid.
Well, I'm not called that as soon as we shared that in my channel.
You did.
The thing is, too, though, is look at what's happened. Okay, they didn't bring back Surratt. They extend Faulkner. Clearly, they're saying that the issue was not the running backs. It was the people opening the holes. But let's also not forget that Canada and Faulkner have a long history together. They've been together at a bunch of different spots, most recently at NC State, and that was when Jalen Samuels was on the team. So, guys, out of the news right there, before we get into the Rooney stuff, anything, pique your interest? We'll start with you, Brian.
Well, one thing that you did not mention that I do want to bring up is apparently the Steelers are talking to a potential quarterbacks coach, and he's also knows a lot about quarterbacking in hockey. If they're bringing over Mike Sullivan from the Penguins, I think the Penguins head coach is going to coach the quarterbacks. That's amazing.
It's a very talented individual.
But you know what? As far as these hirings are to me, I mean, offensive coordinator is the big deal to me. Defensive coordinator, even though they're not hiring one, that's the big deal to me. Offensive line coach, that means a lot too to me. But when you're talking about a running backs coach or a tight ends coach, it's something that I believe, Jeff, I think you said this on Let's Ride. If not, Dave said it. Somebody said it in one of the many podcasts I've listened to this week from BTSC on anywhere that you download your favorite podcast. But really, what one of you said was the fact that it's kind of the rapport. You were talking about Ike Hilliard. I think it was you, Jeff. Ike Hilliard being a young guy and rapport with the young receivers. I kind of think it's that way with a running backs coach, with a tight ends coach. It's more of a guiding light than a coach because they're following a scheme. And I think that's more important than anything. I think the scheme is the most important thing that you're looking at here. I don't care if they were the 31st ranked running team or the 32nd ranked running team. Somebody on our Slack channel put the fact that back in 2003, they were one of the worst running teams. They made a change. They brought in an aging Deuce Staley, and they brought back Marvell Smith, and all of a sudden they're number 2 in the league. They went back to the run. So, there's just so many things to look at here. I think it's good to have the right fit to kind of guide the players. And that's all I look at here. Eddie Faulkner, I don't care. This is the same guy that was here before, and they ran well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Dave, what about you? Anything that kind of caught your eye?
I'm still waiting. You know me. I'm the O-line guy. I'm waiting for the O-line coach. Like I said, I just want to see a difference in philosophy at that position. I just felt like the Steelers, the way they run block and they don't fire off the line. I don't think that's a player issue. I think that was a philosophy issue, and maybe it was a player issue and they just didn't do it. But I just kind of want to see something different there.
Well, they still have some they still have some coaching vacancies to fill. Number one, they still have quarterback coach, which the Steelers have said, or at least reports have said, that they are going to fill that role. It's not going to be a Randy Fichtner 2018 where he was hired as the offensive coordinator, and you're also going to absorb the duties of the quarterback's coach. Supposedly, they're bringing in a quarterback's coach. It's not going to be Matt Canada to do that. They still have to fill out the DB coach. That was Tom Bradley, he did not have a contract extended to him. Therefore, they have to fill that role. Terrell Austin, what?
Do they?
Well, it depends on Terrell Austin, who interviewed for the Tennessee Titans defensive coordinator position. They have not made a hire yet that I've read. So if he gets hired there, then they definitely need some type of secondary coach. And, at the same time, that, like you said, offensive line, they still haven't filled the offensive line coach. They still have 4 coaching vacancies to fill, and that could be even more if, say, Terrell Austin gets hired away and they want to bring in a veteran coach to do his job, which was as an assistant and to help with the secondary. Tom Bradley was just the secondary coach. So they still have a lot of work to do. We'll put it that way. But let's get into the meat of this podcast, and that is the headline, and that is Art Rooney. Art Rooney II, I swear, it's literally like I think sometimes he goes into his office and he has a calendar on the wall. He blindfolds himself, throws a dart, and if it lands on a day, he's like, I'm speaking to the media then. And he doesn't tell anybody, because next thing you know, you're just sitting there at work or sitting at home and you're flipping through Twitter, and all of a sudden, the Jerry Dulack's talking about Art Rooney. Wait a second, what? Next thing you know, here goes Joe Rudder of the Tribune Review, and all these people are, oh my gosh, Art Rooney is speaking. He's doing his end of the year reporting, what he always used to have the reporters in his office, and they would literally be there face to face talking and answering questions. But he does this every year, and everyone is always drawing out the headlines because there's a myriad of headlines that can come out of these interviews. Ben Roethlisberger news, and running the ball, and coaching staff, and offensive coordinator, and blah blah blah. And salary cap. You have websites that are just going, oh my gosh, this is articles galore. But still, I constantly think to myself, he's speaking, but should we even listen? Does it even matter? Is he just not a glorified figurehead that's just blowing smoke? Like, I mean, come on. Like, this is, let's have a legitimate conversation here. We'll talk about what he said in a second. My question for you all is, should we even talk about this stuff? Does this even matter? Brian, go ahead. Answer the question.
Well, I like the title, Should We Even Listen? Because we're going to listen. We have no choice, but should we listen? Yeah, we've got to take everything with a grain of salt. One of my ideas, I was talking to Dave off camera. I was like, should the title even be, what does it mean? Because it doesn't mean much of anything. You can say, and I know we're going to get to the meat of this, but you can say, oh yeah, Ben's going to have to pay for less. Now, and play for less. Now you got to read into that. Are you planning on extending him? Or are you saying, hey, we're going to say this the right way, that if he can't meet what we need, then we're going to have to let him go. So are you starting the trail to get him out the door? So as far as being the figurehead, we kind of crave that because we've had Rooney's at the head all this time. We want that voice. We want that patriarch. We want that voice of reason there. Not the guy that, like you said, he just decided to do a media tour today, talk to the media. I mean, I guess he was done binge watching Bridgerton, Cobra Kai, and Riverdale season 4. And he's like, I guess I'll go ahead and do this. They're going to have to hear from me someday. But all of this means nothing because I'm seeing people put in the live chat, oh, Ben's coming back for less money. No, that's just what this one man said, but you can say all this, but it's easier said than done. In fact, it's easier said and not possible to do. So John Kuzma just said lip service. Yeah, it was nothing but lip service today.
Yeah, you kind of get that feeling. Dave, what about you? What were your takes?
Well, the standard is the standard. And if you have red paint, you paint the card red, but don't do it with the broad brush. I mean, come on. How many Mike Tomlin press conferences did we listen to this year, Jeff? And how many times we were like, man, he says an awful lot while saying nothing. And that's the standard is the standard. So that's what we're used to hearing. So do you think that you're really going to get anything more from the team president? No, but shockingly, there were some things to read into with some of these things. I know Brian had one specific he's going to talk about later, I know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few things that you can take into this. Now, do you go into this thing saying, oh my goodness, he's going to outline everything that the Steelers are going to do? No. Did I already look into and plan an article for tomorrow about, he says, well, this is something we're going to have to look into when it comes to how they do contracts for this and the salary cap situation. Yeah, well, at least he acknowledged a problem. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be certain things that you're like, at least he acknowledged a little bit of the situation, but you're not really getting definitive answers because that stuff's always going to happen behind closed doors, and we're going to be very lucky to find out about it.
So Donald Nolan in the live chat says, why are we crapping on Rooney now? Fans are confusing as heck. I'm not crapping on the Rooneys. And someone just said, you don't disrespect the Rooneys. Look, what I'm saying is Art Rooney is a very important figure. Obviously, he's the owner of the team. He signs the checks. He is the ultimate. He probably has the last say on a lot of different topics, whether it's a draft pick or a free agent signing or maybe cutting a player. But at the same time, what I'm saying is that everyone right now is going overboard, as they always do, with some of these comments. And I'm saying maybe it's time we take it with a grain of salt, that he is just like Mike Tomlin. He is literally just throwing. Now, I do think that he gives nuggets of what the team is going to be focusing on. A few years back, he said, we definitely need to run the ball better. And guess what? The next year, they ran the ball better. I want to say that was the year that James Conner made the Pro Bowl. So that was 2018. Was that the year that Connor made the Pro Bowl, had a really good season? I think, yes.
Yes, it was.
That was the year that the Steelers did run the ball pretty well. And it was that offseason. We need to run the ball better. So for me, it's just, I'm not hating on Art Rooney. I guess I'm talking about more of how are we, the fan base, how are we, the people that are putting out content for fans to enjoy, how are we handling his news? And I'm thinking right now, everyone needs to take it with a grain of salt. Go ahead, Brian. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, because, I want to explain the title a little bit more because should fans listen, here's the thing about it. I'm glad he came out and spoke because you're right. We got some nuggets. But just like the situation with the TJ Watt, and you explained this on the Let's Ride show on Wednesday, you got to look, there's different sources, there's different things. At least you're getting some stuff from the horse's mouth here. But he can't tell you everything that's going on. He just can't because, I read a detailed synopsis of the entire press conference or his talking to the media. And 3 or 4 times someone made him reiterate, so Ben Roethlisberger's gone, right? They kept on asking the same question. And they kept on throwing that out to him. And he said, well, once again, we're going to have to figure it out, but we've got to figure it out what's best for the team. So everybody's going to read into that. So this is basically choose your own adventure when you're listening to Art Rooney II. I'm glad he spoke, and I think he has a lot of good things that he does say. One of the things Dave foreshadowed that I'm going to talk about later is, it's something that there's definitely some writing on the wall here that you could book that's going to happen because he's saying it. But he just can't come out and say definitively, this is happening, this is happening. He just can't.
Yeah. So, okay, with that being said, let's get to some of what he did say. And we're trying to focus on those little nuggets that are actual fact and not just him, waxing poetic when he gets the opportunity. And he is not an owner that's like Jerry Jones, where he is in front of a microphone and has his own radio spot once a week. He does not speak hardly at all. And so this is one thing he does every year when the season ends. He does address the media. So Dave, we'll start with you. What was one aspect of Art Rooney's media session today, we'll call it that, that stood out to you that you wanted to talk about?
All right. Well, I'm going to definitely leave the one for Brian. One of the things that I looked at was the comments that he made with Ben Roethlisberger, and that they can't be basically acknowledged. They can't just sit pat with Ben and say, oh, we're just going to play one more year and play this out. That $41.25 million salary cap hit is something that they're going to have to try to get down. Now, remember, 22.25 of that is money already paid, money already earned, and can't be pushed out. Nothing can be done about that. That's going on the books this season. But it's how they're going to deal with the other 19 million. And he said that basically something's going to have to be done here with Ben, and he's going to have to work with us, and we're going to have to work with him, and we're going to have to figure something out. But of course, what was more interesting than that was then the reports of coming out of what Ben Roethlisberger shared with Ed Bouchette of the Athletic, confirmed it all. He confirmed everything that Mr. Rooney said. He actually told Bouchette, I don't care how much money I make this year. I did that article. It's at behindthesteelcurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. You can go check and read all about that right now, where he said, I don't care about the money I make this year, that he's here to win. If he's going to be back and play, I mean, what is it? He's made over, what is it, $250 million over the course of his career so far. What does it matter to him if he makes 19 million or 9 million or well, it's got to be more. I was going to say, or 900,000. It can't be that, because that's not the minimum. Bottom line is they're going to work something out. And I know some people are like, oh, stop kicking the can. Well, guess what? They kicked the can to the 22.25 million this year. Anything that they kick of the 19 is not going to be nearly as much as what it was. And it's very rare that you have a player that leaves that you don't have at least something the next year. That's just kind of, especially when it comes to a big quarterback like that. So I thought that was interesting, but that wasn't just, I wouldn't have thought nearly as much of it coming from Mr. Rooney, except then you had the Roethlisberger stuff afterwards.
So you're expecting as Sean Manahan gives us $5 in the tip jar, you're expecting him to sign and restructure, yes?
Well, people keep throwing out the term restructure. Technically, a restructure is taking your existing contract and changing it up without adding it, without any extension to it or anything. I guess that's a pure restructure. So if you're saying that you're going to redo how things are done as part of an extension, yes. I know some people have thrown out the whole notion of, voidable years. I don't know that the Steelers have ever done that before. I'm trying to look into that and get an article on that for the website here in the next couple of days, what that really means, which basically is they don't give you a base salary over those years, and unless you sign an extension, you're gone. But I could see a situation where they manipulate this around, and he's going to have a base salary in those other years. But if he retires or something, then of course that's not going to be paid to him. I think you're going to see 2 more years added on to what he has in order to get that number down. Even if he doesn't take a pay cut for this year and still gets paid 19 million, but takes it basically all as the signing bonus, if they throw 2 more years on, that's going to save you close to $12 million of the cap, which for this year would really help.
Yes, it would. Here we go. Grayson Brown gives us $4.99. He says, AR2, it's Art Rooney II, would shock me if he got Ben to retire. This is the nexus of the decade that could set us back 3 years or more, I guess, or moves forward for the future. Ben's, I guess, either GTGO is either got to go or good to go. It could be either one. So a lot of people still think that, Ben is done and they want the team to move on. I'm not saying that I want the team to move on at this point. I'm saying that I think the team should start preparing for the time when he's not around. I think he does still have some good football left in him. I really do. I think that a lot of people think just because the last memory they have is that horrible playoff game, they're just thinking that's what it's going to be. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't agree with that.
I don't either.
But let's get back. Go ahead.
There's a lot of talk about Ben's got to go. And I'm like, he doesn't got to go. He doesn't got to go. If he wants to go, he can go. But the Steelers but eventually it's going to be a point that is he their best option of the options that are out there? I'm sorry. Deshaun Watson's not coming to Pittsburgh. Okay?
Neither is Matthew Stafford.
Neither is Matthew Stafford. I mean, sometimes we got to get ourselves back in reality. The fact that the Steelers did that with Minkah Fitzpatrick was a really big deal. But think about it. They didn't give up that much to get him. So that's why it was such a big deal. So to say he has to go, that just kind of drives me nuts. Kind of like people saying a specific name has to be drafted by the Steelers. That drives me nuts too, but let's not go there. I'm sure Brian has something he wants to say about it.
Go ahead, Brian.
Ben's going to be your college buddy that shows up wearing a robe, wearing out your Netflix account, eating cereal out of a huge salad bowl, and he's going to stay there until you tell him, get out. So if you try to do one of these magical contracts where you do some fake numbers that say that we'll just get rid of you later, no, if he has a contract, if you try to give him extra years and say, well, make an agreement, he's not going until there's no contract. He is going to manipulate and do what he can. He's going to stick around. Ben is not going to retire. Ben is going to be told, you need to retire. That is what is going to happen here. Does Ben, I'm not advocating that Ben retires now. I still think that there's a little bit of a crack in the window. So, I mean, 2021, he's playing in 2021. But this whole thing going back to R2 saying that he can't pay for this number, you've got to do something creative, because the days of kicking the can down the road have got to end with Ben Roethlisberger, because that 41 is going to, you got to pay the piper sometimes. The piper's got to want to get paid, Jeff.
Absolutely. And Sean Manahan gives us another $5. We appreciate it, Sean. He said if TB12, Tom Brady, can play in the Super Bowl at age 43, Ben can play till 40. I agree 100%. Ben will be 39 years old by the time 2021 rolls around. I've got to say this, though, and I've said this on multiple shows, my Let's Ride podcast, as well as this one, that this offseason, because when they were, like, let's say 9-0, and Roethlisberger was throwing touchdowns, he wasn't turning the ball over, what was everyone talking about? Let's give him an extension. Let's get that number 41 down. By giving him an extension, he can still play. He can still quarterback this team for the next few seasons. And then it went south. The whole team went south. It wasn't just Roethlisberger. And because of that, now everyone's kind of soured on that. Let's not forget that. And let's also not forget that this will be the first offseason that he's not dealing with rehabbing an elbow, a throwing elbow at that. He's going to be able to actually get himself ready, I feel, more for this season than he was last season. And not to mention, I can only imagine, knock on wood, that the COVID restrictions will ease a little bit and that he'll be able to do more in the facility with his teammates. So we'll see. Let's not spend this entire first half talking about Ben. There's other stuff to talk about from what Art Rooney said. Brian, what's something else you want to bring up?
All right. So if you're reading between the lines, you're looking at the writing on the bathroom wall. Well, it doesn't look good for James Conner. And so I'm going to read his quote here. We've already, when talking about the running game, we've already started to make changes to address that. There are more to come. We obviously are going to have some changes on the roster at running back this year, with James being a free agent. There's no question. It's something that we have to address. Everybody in the building agrees that you can't finish 32nd in the league in running and feel you're going to have a successful season. Translation, James, thanks for your service. It's time to look elsewhere. He's gone.
Yeah. I to be honest with you, when I looked at and I read this list during my Let's Ride podcast, it'll be running Friday morning, I went down the whole unrestricted free agent list, and it's a ridiculously long list, by the way. I never thought that he was coming back ever. It's just, even if he played well, I figured he would price himself out of Pittsburgh. And if he didn't play well, they're not going to want him back. Dave, I don't think there's any chance that James Conner's back. You agree or disagree?
I mean, the only chance is if he's like literally league minimum that, and even that's going to be more expensive than the guys they have on rookie contracts, if you know what I mean. So I'm not going to say it's completely impossible. I would just say it is extremely highly improbable is the way that I would put it. I'm not saying it's a 0% chance. It's your 1 in a million.
Yeah.
So you're
No,
telling
I
me
get it.
there's a chance.
It's people were bringing up in the live chat, rightfully so, that he was running behind a really bad offensive line in terms of run blocking, and you can't ignore that. But at the same time, with a team that is already bellied up to the salary cap, and no one knows what's going to happen with the salary cap. Sure, a couple agents come out and say, "I can see the salary cap going up." Well, yeah, of course you're going to say that. You're representing players. Maybe do you have any more insider information? I don't know. But we don't know what the salary cap's going to do. And if a team's already up against it and it goes down, you're not bringing in hardly any free agents and signing your own if they're getting competitive offers elsewhere on the open market. Dave, speaking of contracts, you want to talk about Art Rooney's comments about the Steelers' contracts, or at least lead into your article that's going to be running?
Oh, yeah. It's just he made something. Do I really expect there to be a big change? No, I don't. But the fact that he acknowledged a problem, he did say, maybe we do, as much as the Steelers are up against the salary cap this year, we might need to reconsider thinking about someday, with the possibility of, if you know what I mean, how they do contracts and how they do restructures. I don't think they're going to change them that much. I just think maybe right now they're saying, how we took every single possible penny and restructured every player in order to gain as much salary cap last year, and all those guys only had 1 year left, so it all got pushed to this year. Yeah, we might not want to do that again. Because that's what happened. Every player that they could, they restructured every player last year, and now you have massive dead money hits. And he was basically saying, you know what? He said that this might be the worst salary cap situation they've ever dealt with. So, which is true.
You think so?
Well, it doesn't help that it went down. I mean, even if the salary cap didn't go down, but remember, a lot of people were thinking that the salary cap this year was going to explode because of the new TV deal. But then that's now not the case. They're looking at that the following year. Who knows? Bottom line is, they might need to reconsider. They might possibly need to someday reconsider thinking about doing things differently. So he at least acknowledged that you might not want to kick the can too much.
If the salary cap can just remain the same, I think it's a win for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Because they could manage that. If it goes down, even if it goes from 198 to 190, that's trouble. Because they just don't have then you're talking cap casualties. So let's ask you this. Brian, we'll start with you. Who would be like a cap casualty that you could see, okay, they're up against it, we got to let you go. We may not want to, but we have to for financial reasons. Who would be one of your cap casualties?
Joe Hayden comes to mind. I might be wrong on the numbers. I mean, Dave's wincing, so I might be wrong, but yeah, I mean, you would think that he's a guy that would suffer from that. A guy that I also think that could suffer as a cap casualty would be a guy like Vince Williams.
Yeah. Especially, like, I look at Vince Williams, and he's a good player, and he's still the heart and soul of that defense, but that would be a tough call. Dave, what about you? Any cap casualties on your mind?
Well, you got to look at who's going to save you the most other than BTR. And if you look at all of those, well, technically, you got the whole thing with TJ Watt that his contract isn't guaranteed until the start of the new league year. Trust me, I'm not talking about his $10 million. If he plays on his fifth-year option with $10 million, that's still a steal. So take that number out of there. That's why I'm not acknowledging that one. It's actually David DeCastro that you can save the most money with. Yeah. But I don't know that they have more inside information of how much he was dealing with injury this year rather than just how his play was going. Okay. You've got DeCastro, you've got Pouncey, and then Brian says Joe Hayden, who does have more dead money than what you would save, but at the same time, I just don't know if that's where they're going to go. You could save a little bit more with Steven Nelson, but he's a guy I don't think that they should cut. I think they should extend. Joe Hayden, that's kind of tough to do, and he's getting up there. So Brian might be right with that one. It's just it's a hard decision with that one.
Yeah.
You know what? You bring up David DeCastro. I want to talk about this when we come off the break and his potential injuries. All right. So we'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, don't go anywhere because we're not going anywhere. Be right back. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to the second part of the Steelers preview. I'm Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Joining me as always, the other co-editor, Dave Schofield, and the podcast producer, Brian Anthony Davis. And guy, right before in part one, or just a few minutes ago, if you're watching live, you were talking about David DeCastro, and you said we don't know the extent of his injuries. And that also kind of ties into Matt Filer. He gets put on injured reserve. He's an unrestricted free agent. That's neither here nor there. And he gets put on injured reserve. And then when he's available to play, they come in. Guys, at what point do we talk about the evaluation of these situations? Because to me, at either position, right guard or left guard, they had a player who was playing extremely well in Kevin Dotson. And in every situation, if David DeCastro is that banged up, why in the world would you not let a guy who's playing good football come in and play and let DeCastro heal up and then get it back in there? Does this strike a nerve? Does this hit a nerve with anyone else? To me, Matt Filer playing in the playoffs would have been the biggest slap in the face to Kevin Dotson after I think that he had a very, very impressive rookie season. Was he all pro? No. Was he Pro Bowl? No. He's a rookie. Did he play extremely well for a rookie? I think so. I'm no expert, but I think so. Brian, what's your take on this kind of stuff?
You're absolutely correct. I was offended that Kevin Dotson was not playing in that game. But as far as DeCastro goes, I feel that he was, I mean, Dave said it earlier, that they know more than what we know. And I got to tell you, it really seems like he was rushed back. He was beat up. And they knew right away, even in the Broncos game, they knew early on that Kevin Dotson was showing some signs of brilliance, that he can stay in there and he's not going to be a liability. What he turned out to be is probably one of the most popular Steelers on offense last season. Everybody was asking for Kevin Dotson to play, and he became everybody's darling. If it wasn't for, I tell you what, if Chase Claypool had 4 or 5 less touchdowns, Dotson could have been Rookie of the Year on that team. He could have won the Joe Green Performance Award. Yeah, probably not. You probably don't do that, but that's what kind of impact he made. And when he was in there, they ran better. So that's the thing you're looking at. But really, DeCastro was, I mean, just from my eye test, it seemed like he was hurt. It didn't seem like he was indifferent. Some people said he seemed indifferent. No, he seemed like he was beat up and just fighting every single down.
Dave, what's your take on that?
Well, we don't know whose decision it was to go with Filer. I mean, I know everything ultimately comes down to the head coach, but you know, what did everyone else think about this? Because you know, you've got head coach, offensive coordinator, offensive line coach. 2 of those 3 aren't there anymore. I wonder who won. I wonder who ultimately pushed for to not play Kevin Dotson in that playoff game. You know, that's, I mean, even at some point to just say, you know what, let's get him in there and everything like that. I don't know. So yeah, that's when it comes to the offensive line, and you know, we were ultimately talking about DeCastro and everything. They didn't bring back their coach, so you don't know how much that is. Look at one Alvin Bud Dupree and how when a certain coach was let go, how he kind of turned into the first round pick that the Steelers had always hoped that they had with him. Was it because the coach was let go? I don't know. So with these guys, who knows? Maybe I really trust the Steelers that they have the inside information, that they can do the right thing, that if the people are like, oh, DeCastro needs to stay or DeCastro needs to go, that they're going to understand his injury, his attitude about everything. You know, if he's still wanting to play. I know Big Al made a comment during the season that he didn't seem to have the same fire this year, or just kind of the same attitude about life. It could have just been, you know, a lot of people had the COVID blues. He could have been one of them, and things like that. But with a new coach and everything else, what they think that really means. So there's a lot to the equation.
Absolutely. Just a thought that came to my head. Now, Sean Manahan gives another $5. He said, should we trade up to get the best running back? And so draft talk is tough because there's a lot of different options, and we can all talk about scenarios and things like that. And what ifs and maybe this, that, or the other. What I want to talk about in this next segment is team needs, because Dave and I can debate whether the Steelers should draft a quarterback or not, but let's talk about team needs. So when you look at this roster, and let's just for the sake of argument assume that Ben Roethlisberger will be back. In my opinion, if Rooney says he wants him back, if Ben wants to come back, there's nothing really else to discuss unless it's just a numbers issue. So outside, Roethlisberger's back. Keep that in the back of your mind. Brian, we'll start with you. What is the number one team need? And let's be specific here. So if you're saying O-line, I want a specific position. What is the biggest team need for this team heading into the 2021 draft or just the offseason, maybe in free agency?
All right. So it's got really interesting with R2's comments today because, we weren't even talking about the possibility of adding more years to Ben. Everyone going into today, everybody was thinking 2021, boom, that's the end with Ben. If he makes it to 2021, a lot of us figured he's making it to 2021, but that would be the end of the road. So if something happens that an extra year is added on, quarterback in the first round is off the board. I just want to throw that out right away. They will not go ahead.
No, or you're coming back to agree with me where you disagree with me last week. I love it.
Well, this is after Art Rooney's comments. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All I'm saying is if they're extending them, quarterbacks off the board, they're not going to do it with Ben looming. They're not going to keep him around. So getting back to the original question, yes, offensive lineman is number one for me. And the more that I think about it, I'm thinking more that center guard combo or center. Because when you look at, I know we're speculating that Big Al is gone. Even if Big Al is gone, I would really think that Zach Banner is going to sign a 1-year deal. I mean, it's even when he made those comments, best exit interview ever, and he tweeted that out. He's being excited for next year. So they're looking at already keeping this guy around. So you have Chooks and you have Banner. They would be your tackles. You're going to, DeCastro's sticking around unless something drastic happens, and you have Kevin Dotson entrenched there. They keep on talking about 50-50 with Marquise Pouncey. And the thing about Pouncey is you just don't know whether he's going to stay or go. But if he stays, there's not going to be a 2022. He is at the end of his line here. So with that being said, and he has 1 year left on his deal. So at this point, I think you need to find your center guard for the future. You can add some depth for year one. If Pouncey sticks around, then you've got the opportunity to have a guy, have his red shirt year in the pros. I do want to see a running back. The answer to one of the questions that we saw earlier, should the Steelers trade up? You do not need to trade up for a running back. At the number 2, in round 2 last year, J.K. Dobbins went round 2. Jonathan Taylor, round 2. Clyde Edwards-Helaire went round 1, but he went in the last pick of round 1. What's that?
32nd pick.
Yeah. So he went with the very last pick. So he was one pick away from being a second rounder. You don't have to trade up. I love the idea of Najee Harris, but be realistic. That line needs some help. You can get that running back in the second round if you want him. There's a guy in North Carolina right now that averaged 7 yards a carry, had like 17, 19 touchdowns. I keep on forgetting his name, but it's Javonte Williams. There it is. Javonte Williams. That's a guy you go ahead and look at. There's actually 2 guys from North Carolina. So be careful with that. But there's 2 going to be eligible in the draft, and they're probably going to be drafted in the top 4 rounds. But yeah, I that's what I want to see. Do I want to see a tight end? Yeah. Do I want to see a quarterback down the line? Yeah. But if it's not going to be your Trey Lance, then I don't want him. I don't want Mac Jones. Trust me. Everyone that's loving on Mac Jones, don't want Mac Jones. I don't want JP Losman either. I don't want. They were top heavy at number 3. The Bills at number 24 in 2004. We need a quarterback too. Let's go JP Losman. No, don't do that. Don't settle for your next quarterback. Don't look at a guy in the third round saying maybe we could groom him to get up there. Go all out. Go bust. Trade up if you have to, if you decide you want to do that. But if I'm the GM, I'm taking care of that line, and I'm starting in the middle at center.
All right. Grayson Brown gives us $9.99. He said the looming salary cap makes it so frustrating this year. The Steelers have never been in this situation before. I fear keeping Ben will haunt us. The needs are looming. He says inside linebacker, left tackle, center, left guard, running back, cornerback, skull. Death. All right, Dave, your turn. Go ahead and go.
My turn. Okay. Well, this is an extremely difficult question because we know this is going to change big time depending on who the Steelers cut, sign, all those other things. So we are dealing with this right now at this moment. Well, first thing I'm going to say before we go on, because I preach this all the time, I can't stand falling in love with specific players and names that you put out there. Do you know why? Because when you fall in love with that name and you've already got that name, next thing you know, they're wearing purple.
I just did that. Javonte Williams.
No, that was J.K. Dobbins last year. Everyone shouting about J.K. Dobbins. The fact that he was available and the Steelers didn't draft him was even more interesting. But then, of course, where does he end up? On that purple team. So I don't fall in love with players because I look at what the Steelers need position-wise, and then I kind of trust them to know out of that group of players who's best. So that's why I love this question about asking about the position. The thing I just don't like is that we have to answer it now rather than when I have to actually fit.
Well, we're going to do this more than.
I know. So let's go now. So I'm going to go with who is on their roster now, because Marquise Pouncey has not retired officially. He said he was considering it, telling players he was going to, and apparently Ben's trying to talk him out of it. We'll see what happens there. But you don't have Filer, you don't have Villanueva. You know I'm going offensive line. The only question is where. And because of what the Steelers have based on who is under contract right now, I'm going to say tackle. But I could see that changing by the time the draft comes around to where it's going to be more important for the interior. Because right now, the only tackle the Steelers have, other than practice squad guys, is Chooks. So that's why, based on it now, I would say tackle, that's your bigger need. Do I think Banner could be back? Yes. If something happens where they sign Filer and he's available to go back to tackle, that's fine too. That's when you might, if Pouncey retires, then you shift to interior offensive lineman. So based on today, I'm going to say tackle. But I'm going to say one thing, not running back in the first round, because although I think the Steelers could add a good running back, and I would be very much on board with them drafting a running back in the first 3 rounds, which they did not do last year. I just don't want it to be in the first round.
All right. You guys make good cases. And I think you know where I'm going to go. I think that you still have to prepare for the future at the quarterback position. I mean, and Brian said it, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And that means you got to go up and you got to get the guy that you want. And you have to be sure that this is the next guy. And if he has to sit a year, that's fine. I'm totally okay with that. And people will say, well, that's a waste of a pick. Is it really a waste of a pick if that player is your quarterback for the next 15 years after that 1 year that he sat? I don't think it's a waste of a pick. I wouldn't trade any. Would anyone go back and say, oh, man, I really wish we had that first-round pick back that we gave to Miami for Minkah Fitzpatrick? No one's regretting that because you got Minkah Fitzpatrick. If you trade up and get a guy, and I'm not going to, I do like Trey Lance a lot. I've watched more of his film than any prospect of the last probably 5 years. I just think he's an intriguing guy. He's athletic. He seems like he's that new type of quarterback that's being a trend in the NFL right now. And if he's your guy for the next decade plus, then you do whatever you got to do to get him, because you know that if you have that quarterback, you're always going to be competitive. You're always going to have that window open, and you have to have a succession plan after Ben Roethlisberger. It's something they didn't do after Terry Bradshaw. They didn't even do. I mean, you think about all the quarterbacks they went through. I mean, at one point during Bill Cowher's time, you were just thinking, oh, who's the quarterback this year? You don't want that to be the case with the Steelers anymore. You want them to have the next guy. So, there are other needs. And I'm not saying that you're wrong, Brian, when you said the center and Dave with tackle and someone brings up inside linebacker. I'm not disagreeing with any of those. And if they went that route, I wouldn't be upset. But I think if you're going to go for a quarterback, and everyone that knows prospects more than I do, better than I do, they say that next year's quarterback class is not as good as this one. So if next year's crop is not as good, then you might need to capitalize on this one. And you might need to be looking ahead and saying, what do we have to give up? How much is it going to cost to get to 10 or maybe 9? Or maybe you don't have to go up to like 12, but still, I'm not even complaining about what they gave up to get Devin Bush a few years ago, because he's a great player. You sometimes have to make aggressive moves. So that's my pick. I'm going to go with quarterback. I know that could possibly change, probably won't, but it could possibly change this offseason. Go ahead, Brian.
I want to ask you a question, though, Jeff, because I agree with everything you're saying. I agree with what Dave's saying, too. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think there's any wrongs. But what I said about what they decided to do with Ben Roethlisberger, if they commit to him to 2023, are you going to want to bring in, are you going to want to trade up now and go first round on a quarterback if they're committing to him? They're
not committing to him until 2023.
But if
they'll do a contract till then, but they're not realistically having him play. Even Ben today said himself, I've got one more year in me. He didn't say anything beyond that. So,
but what I'm saying,
he didn't say only one more year, but he said he has one more year.
What I'm saying, though, is you could commit to a guy for 1 year. I mean, you could commit to putting a guy on a bench for 1 year, but do you want to go the Aaron Rodgers route and Brett Favre him and make him sit 3 to 4 years?
I'm not opposed to it. I just don't want to force it. Yeah. I don't want, you're right. I don't want a JP Lossman. You don't want to force it and say, we need to get a quarterback, and you don't want to Artie Burns it.
No, I don't want, notice when I talk about this, I never say take a quarterback at 24. It's always what? You got to trade up and get him. You got to make the aggressive move. I couldn't tell you the last time a quarterback at 24 was any good. I mean, yeah, people say, well, Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. You know, I mean, but yeah, he and Antonio Browns are not the norm.
I can answer that question.
Lamar Jackson was 32.
He was 32, yeah. But do I want Lamar? I don't want Lamar Jackson.
I don't either.
Okay.
Aaron Rodgers was 25, I think.
Yeah.
In 05.
He was in the 20s.
Yeah. It's rare. We'll put it that way. It's rare. Evgeny Crosby gave us $4.99. They got beat tonight 4-1. Bringing back Ben without bringing back Juju and Bud Dupree to max out this team's chances doesn't make any sense. Find the money to sign them. Well, again, it depends on the salary.
Ben was saying, though. I think that's kind of what Ben's point was: is I'll do whatever I can to get this number back down to keep the guys I keep. That's another thing that we haven't covered yet about what AR2 said, is that he would take this year's roster next year. If he could just keep everything, he would do it. Some people don't like that. I'm also thinking you're going to, add in the draft. But can I answer part of this question?
What question?
The Bud and Juju thing.
Sure.
Here's the thing. If you told me, I'm wearing the hat as long as I can because I got the Juju hat on right now for those of you listening in podcast form. Would I like to keep both of those players? I would. But you also have to ask yourself of cost over replacement. Where right now, if you don't have Bud Dupree, you have Alex Highsmith, who should be improved in his second year, and look at how little his contract is. Do you want to pay that much, so much more than Highsmith? Are you going to get that much more in production? Is the tough decisions that the Steelers front office has to make. Or sometimes it's easy for us to say the Steelers defense was better with Dupree because he was good. Yeah. But is he $15 million a season better than the next guy that they have to play there? And it's kind of the same thing with Juju and the young receivers that they have. That's the questions you're going to have to ask.
Yeah. And they just have a ton of free agents, and you have to ask yourself, okay, do we sign someone like Juju or do we try to keep Mike Hilton? Yeah. Or do we try to keep Cam Sutton? You're not going to be able to keep everyone. Like the Steelers are going to be staring at a crap ton of compensatory picks, possibly.
You're only allowed 4. You can only max out at 4.
They would get 4 because they're going to lose a ton of players, even if they do keep some. So, Brian, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I want to back up Dave a little bit here. I want to look at last year. Everybody would have loved to have kept Javon Hargrave. Yeah. But in the 2020 season, how many times did anybody say, oh, man, we should have kept Hargrave?
That's because Alualu played better than Hargrave did the year before.
And Alualu needs to be resigned.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a business.
He's cheap.
It's a business move that has to be made in this era of the NFL. we're not. I've been watching so many for the retro shows. I've been watching so many games from the 1970s, and they were able to keep those guys around, and it was amazing. Even the 1979 team. I know this is a trivia question we've had before. They were a completely homegrown team. There was not a single guy on the 1979 roster that played on another team. You can't even do that with 5 guys. You can't even say that with 5 guys on a team this year. That's how much turnover and how crazy it is with these rosters these days. So, I agree with Dave. I mean, I would love to have Bud Dupree and Juju Smith-Schuster and all of these guys. I would love to have Art Rooney II's same roster as last year. It's just, there's no way it could be done.
Yeah. BSG 74 gives us $4.99. Says Bill, he's talking about Cowher, would cut veterans 1 year early before their time, or maybe he's talking about Belichick. I don't know. Why are the Steelers allowing players to say when they are done? Pouncey is an example. It's a great point. I mean, Dave, you want to say something?
Yeah, I would love to answer that. Okay,
sure.
It's the mistake Mr. Butt Naked Get Robbed made. When he left, when the Steelers offered him a great contract and he turned it down because he didn't understand contracts and the Steelers enough. That's why he even overrode his agent reportedly the first year, because he thought he knew better and really he knew nothing. And it's how the Steelers operate. The Steelers operate different than other teams. He wanted that guaranteed money, and that's all that matters. But if the Pittsburgh Steelers operate in this way and you can trust them to operate in a certain way, then you can have these things and work them this way. If you're going to start doing things that you say, well, this is what these other teams do to these guys, then you're not going to get the trust with the players that do the things that they do at certain times, because it's the way the Steelers do business. If you've established that reputation of how the Steelers do business, do you really want to tear that down and then have players not trust that things are going to get done that way?
Brian, did you have a take on that at all?
Not really. I think he's right on that. I mean, you've got to look at it that way. I mean, Bell made that huge mistake. There's no way that the players have got to look at it as not just a business on their part, but really they've got to look into the crystal ball a little bit more, and they're not doing that enough. I mean, what they really have to say is, like, do I take a little bit less and not be the guy that my agent tells me that I should be, because the agent wants you to be the highest paid player and tells you can be, but you could be just as happy at this number with this many of years if you kind of try to look at the bigger picture. And I think that's what Dave was trying to say. That's what these players need to do.
Good points. Good points made by all. Dave, we have some trivia tonight?
Yeah, we do. Okay, can I comment on one thing that I know people are saying? They're like, well, but the Steelers did force out Polamalu. I was at Polamalu's last game, that playoff game, and it was kind of sad to see this. I'm like, why aren't they using Troy the way they always use Troy? And the reason is they couldn't. Okay, and that's the difference with trying to play safety. And that was his style of play. And he was so great at it. And when you play with that style and that way, there's going to be a chance that runs out. What happened with Polamalu? The Steelers didn't push him out too early. The fans weren't ready to give up on him yet. That was the biggest thing with Polamalu. So some people say, yeah, looking back on it, we realized I was at that game. And frankly, I was saying if they're using the Troy in this way, they were better off playing Will Allen in that playoff game against Baltimore. But that's just because, it's not a knock on Troy. It's just I still think he was still playing somewhat injured. But anyway, I've got the trivia. You ready for it? Unless anyone wanted to comment on Polamalu real quick.
No, I'm good. Let's do it.
You good? Okay. We're going to talk about something I said on my Scobro show that I'm like, I should have said that for trivia, but I decided I took it to the next level. If I'll ask you guys to see if you actually listened. Who's the one player for the Pittsburgh Steelers that played every snap, on whether on defense or on offense on their side of the ball? Who was the one player who did that this year?
Well, it wasn't the guy who did it last year, because he was hurt in a game, and that's Edmonds, I believe, was
Villanueva.
It is Alejandro
I think
Villanueva.
yeah.
Yes, he played every snap this year. He also played every snap last year. Going to make you guys just take a random shot in the dark. We're not going to do it Price is Right style, where if you go over, you lose. How many, and I had to do this myself, so this took some time. How many consecutive snaps at left tackle do you think Alejandro Villanueva has taken between the regular season and postseason? Then I have a better question or two other questions after this that you guys.
Wow.
He's played 2 straight seasons.
Oh, I said at least 2.
Oh, jeez. I don't even know how to guess this. 300
snaps.
Sure, I don't know.
Okay.
I literally.
How many snaps do you think that he played this year?
I don't know. Probably 300.
No, it was exactly 1,100.
1,100. Oh,
yeah.
Yeesh. Brian, take a guess.
Some people are guessing here. Some of them are guessing really low. So
I'll just go. I'll just go 850.
I literally just told you that he played 1,100 snaps this year.
He wasn't paying attention.
Seattle does have 2 losses.
Yes. Are you ready for this number? Hey, someone almost got it. I'm going to bring it up. GS said 3,500. It was 3,437 by my calculations.
Consecutive snaps
for the Steelers. Any idea when the last time was he wasn't in a game? It was a game where the Steelers took him out to rest.
Well, if they took him out to rest, so let's go ahead and say the Cleveland game to end the 2016 season, week 17.
That's a good guess, but it has been since then.
The Cleveland game to end the 2017 season?
You're close. You're very close. It was a very nice present for him. I'll just say that.
Oh, Christmas Day against the Texans.
Christmas Day against the Texans. He came out because ultimately the question is this: who was the last player other than Alejandro Villanueva to play snaps at left tackle for the Steelers? It would have been that Christmas Day game.
What year was that?
That was 2017, correct, Brian?
Yeah.
2017.
I'm going to guess Chris Hubbard.
Is he right or wrong?
He is correct. It was Chris
Wow.
Hubbard, yes. Because Chris Hubbard came in and Matt Filer came in, but Matt Filer was still then playing guard. He came in. BJ Finney actually played at guard that game. And when Pouncey came out at the end to rest, Finney bumped over to center. So that's kind of how it went.
I feel like one day we'll look back and we'll say we didn't appreciate Alejandro Villanueva when he was playing.
Yeah, I feel like we don't appreciate him enough now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, do you have trivia?
Yes, I do. So, the Steelers aren't in the Super Bowl, but we're still talking about Steelers Super Bowl winners of the past on the Retro Show. We're going to be doing a lot of that. So I want to talk about touchdowns in a Super Bowl. Now, we've talked about before how John Stallworth leads the Steelers with 5. He's not the only one that has 5. He had 5 receiving touchdowns. Franco Harris has 5 as well. 1 receiving touchdown, 4 rushing touchdowns. There is another running back that has 2 receiving touchdowns to go along with 2 rushing touchdowns. So he's second to those fellas with 4 touchdowns. Who would that be?
In a Super Bowl.
In not a single Super Bowl, but in Super Bowls.
In Super Bowls for the Steelers,
Yes.
2 rushing and 2 receiving.
I remember Rocky Blyer had that nice catch. But I don't know if I'm going to say Rocky Blyer. That's how I'm going to.
Yep. The Rock. Robert Blyer. He had in 1978, he had 1-1. In 79, he had 1-1.
There you go.
See, what threw me off is what you said that they also had rushing touchdowns. If you would have just said a running back with 2 receiving touchdowns, I would have said Rocky, but I wasn't sure if he had the rushing. I wasn't sure if he had the rushing ones. So that's pretty impressive.
I wanted to make you think.
Yep.
All right.
You have any crazy question here at the end?
Hey, Bad, what do you think the cumulative GPA has been for the 2 a.m. chicks you picked up? That's my trivia for the night.
In my mind, it's incomplete, but there was a nice little run, and when Power was going on, so was the bad fad.
And when you wake up and that stupid chick's wearing your Greg Lloyd jersey, making you breakfast. All right, let's do final thoughts.
Making
Brian.
me flapjacks.
All right, Brian, go ahead. Final thoughts.
Know.
Go.
My final thought is, Jeff said it the other day. Look, there's going to be a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of reading between the lines right now. Don't overreact. Just react and say, so this is what the flavor of the day is. Because there's going to be so many flavors of the day. There's going to be so many things to talk about. But I could guarantee you that it's all going to be every month until the draft. It's going to go back to draft Najee Harris. I mean, we're going to hear that all the time. It's going to keep on going back to that. And you could read all the mock drafts you want, but it's just like a fart. You don't trust a mock draft, please.
In a skillet? Is it in a skillet? Come on. All right, sorry.
R.I.P.
Those of you that don't know,
R.I.P. Randy Land. Yeah, all right, Dave, go ahead.
It's crazy that we think about this. Part of me really wants to go back and look at our preview shows from this time of year last year to think about what we were talking about the Steelers and everything and how much everything changes. And so much is going to change with our perception of this team and everything else as we go on. My goodness, if we just turn back 2 months, the people that are saying Ben Roethlisberger needs to go. I mean, do you think they were saying the same thing 2 months ago? It all changes so much. If you were to tell us 1 year ago that the Steelers that Ben Roethlisberger would come back and play every game that he wanted to, what Jeff called, he's going to play 15 games and rest the last week of the season. And the Steelers would go 12-4. We wouldn't be out of our minds. But of course, none of that means as much without the postseason. So we understand the problems there. We get that. But at the same time, if you would say, hey, we could go 12-4 again, make the postseason, and be healthy going into it, I would take that again. I would much rather have the Steelers being 12-4, winning their last 6 games than winning their first 11, which was something I said during the streak. So the whole point is you've got to get there. You've got to be playing well as you're getting there. And there's a lot that's going to happen between now and then. We think we all have the answers. And you know what? We don't. But it's really fun to talk about what we think those answers are.
That's true. My question, my final thought is more of a question. Randy Land is officially retired. He was fired. Okay, but it's closed. We're closing up Randy Land. And someone on Twitter, one of my followers said, "Is this now going to be Candyland for Canada or something like that?" And I was like, I don't know if I want to keep the amusement park thing going. I think we have to think of something for Matt Canada. I also want to see if he's any good, because if he's good, then we don't need a mocking nickname. But if you have an idea for a Matt Canada themed name for the Steelers offense in 2021, we'll get that ball rolling right off the bat.
The Great White North.
Canada better not be dry. There you go. Randy Lane was so good. Randy Lane was the best. All right, folks, make sure you check us out at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com for your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. On top of that, make sure you find us wherever you get your podcasts. Search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain. Subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do so that you don't miss a thing, like Dave's Stat Geek podcast, my Let's Ride podcast, and Michael Beck's The Live Mic, only found on our audio platforms. So search us, find us, and subscribe. Dave, why don't you send us out?
Hey.
Best way to end it. We'll see you next week on another Steelers preview.